Welcome to Talking Tempo, your weekly pod breakdown on Toronto's WNBA team. I'm Quincy Campbell, and in our inaugural pod, Nate and Brad will touch on the Tempo roster, the makeup and the construction. We're going to watch a player assessment with the video, Coach Brondello's offensive style with the New York Liberty and the Australian national team, and how it might fit in with the Tempo. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the first ever episode of Talking Tempo. This is a weekly podcast where we focus on the Toronto Tempo and the WNBA in general. My name is Nate McKibbon. I'm here with Brad Campbell. We'll let you guys go through we will go through some introductions in a second, but we're going to give Brad an opportunity to talk about why or how we've gotten to this point.
All right. So what is this podcast? What are we? What are we doing here? How are we potentially different from some others? So before we get into some brief bios about Nate and myself, this is a podcast dedicated to breaking down the strategies, systems, and evolution of the Toronto Tempo. Each episode explores offensive and defensive schemes, advanced analytics, league trends, and player development to give listeners a deeper understanding of the modern NBA and obviously the Toronto Tempo. My coaching background and expertise, the men's basketball coach at the University of Western Ontario, now called Western University, for over 20 years. I was an assistant coach at Western before that. I've got high school experience, club experience. I've coached internationally and also professional basketball. And obviously, like I said, currently at the university/college level here in Canada. Nate, what about you?
Very similar to you, head coach women's basketball here at Western University, otherwise known as University of Western Ontario, as you so eloquently put. Going into my 8th year, or 12th year overall as a head coach at the youth sports level here in Canada. Used to be a club and high school coach. I've been part of national team programming for over 10 years. Lots of experience, especially on the women's side. I'm looking forward to getting started and picking your brain about all things Tempo.
Let's get into it. So how are we going to start off our inaugural episode here? What do we got?
We're going to talk about roster composition. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about. Obviously, you sent me a clip of Sandy Brondello talking about different cuts that they're going to have to make. Obviously, she didn't go into specifics, and there's a lot of things that go into it. But we're going to try to predict best we can based on our knowledge of the players and based on what we know about the WNBA rules, who we think should be on the inaugural team starting off on May 8th when they get started in the regular season. So to start off, we're going to show very similar to what some people would put together as far as a scouting report and go through a little bit of a projected depth chart. So there's 20 athletes that have been invited to come to training camp. Obviously, have very different contract situations. The ones in the lighter blue are ones with guaranteed contracts, which we can assume will be on the team no matter what. There are others like the rookie scale contract from Sabally. She should be on the team no matter what. And then obviously Kiki Rice is going to be a big part of what they do moving forward. The other interesting thing is obviously we're making assumptions, we're making predictions here before they've even started their first preseason game. But there are quite a few players that haven't even attended camp as of yet because of their schedules over in Europe. So that would be Alamond, Laxa, Conde, Milic, and Lexi Held. So we're making predictions based on players that have not even participated in their first overall practice at the WNBA level. So we've projected the 12 athletes that are at the top of the screen there. I've projected very differently than some. I know a lot of people are assuming because Julie Alamond was selected first overall in the expansion draft that she'll be part of the starting lineup. I just think that based on what I know about the WNBA and some of the systems that Coach Brondello has run in the past, running 3 guards might be a little bit small for what they're looking to do. Post depth is obviously going to be an issue as you start to go through the roster composition. They have a number of guards, and I know there's going to be a desire to go small, but I'm just not necessarily sure it fits style of player or what's the best possible team moving forward. Any thoughts from you as you start to look through some of what we put up there?
Yeah, no, obviously with the Tempo being an expansion franchise and in their first season, an awful lot of growth issues, uncertainty that goes along with it. So, as we're going to get into some roster composition here, it's interesting, what kind of philosophy or approach the Tempo are going to take here. Are we just going to try to acquire the best talent that we can and see how that fits as a start and try to win games initially? Or are we going to understand that it's going to be, a rough season? I'm not going to throw in the tank word in potential, but maybe something of that nature so we can play for a higher draft pick. Maybe next year's draft seems to project very well. the first, 1 to 3 players? Are we going to take more of that philosophy toward it? So it seems, if Nate, you would agree, that the Tempo are looking to try and potentially win the most games as possible here. A very interesting expansion draft with 2 teams coming in, as well as the Portland Fire. It looks like they're trying to acquire the Tempo are the best talent that they can through that. And obviously made a big free agent signing there as well, which we can touch on, but with who they call Slim, correct?
That's very much true. Brittany Sykes. Obviously, they picked Marina Mabry and they courted her. She actually became the first WNBA player with a $1 million contract. They were very aggressive getting Sykes in. All-star last year with Washington and Seattle. Mund was their first choice in the expansion, but again, Mabry and Sykes are 2 very ball-dominant pick and roll players. Adding another player who doesn't necessarily stretch the court, is more ball dominant, I just don't think works. So I've actually projected that Kia Nurse is the starter from day one, based on the fact that catch and shoot, spread the court, and sort of play off of others. I think it's fair to say that Tammy Fagbenley is going to start. She was another big one that they brought in free agency. And Sabally is one that's always had tremendous amount of talent, but has had some injury concerns in the past. So I think she has the highest upside at any of the forwards. And Sykes can shoot open threes, but again, more of her is trying to get downhill. So if you start with the 3 guards, really your only true 3-point threat, or your one that really people really have to pay attention to, is Mabry. And she's going to play on the ball as much as off the ball. So I just think for balance, I think you got to get one of those 3 guards to the bench, although a lot of people are going to assume that all 3 start and then they go really small, because Alamon's probably 5'8", Sykes is about 5'9", plays a little longer than what she is, great defensive player. Mabry is actually the biggest of the 3 at 5'11". Not as fast as the other 2, but plays a little bit more physical. But you really got to focus on her as probably their dominant scorer going into their first year.
It'll be really interesting to see once we get into games. Obviously, there's a couple of preseason games coming up. We wanted to get this pod out before then, because then obviously at that point we can get some film, break some of that down. Just a little initial thoughts and predictions, as you mentioned, and anticipation of what the season is going to look like. And as I know you've got some breakdowns there too of some of the individual players, just some notes as we get to that. But I think it'll be really interesting, not only digging into the way that this team is going to want to play, or are they going to see what fits in terms of their system? Are they going to have a direct system they're going to make fit, or are they going to try and see if they're going to really tailor around the talent something that they're going to run and execute to try and take advantage of what they have, both offensively and defensively. So I think that's part of the intrigue. Once we get to the games and the game film, we can really start to break that down as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously Isabel Harrison and Naira Sabally both played for Sandy in New York last year. So they have a good feeling, and we've seen them both play within their system. But if you actually go through Synergy and they start to compare players, they have player comps, not necessarily are in NCAA and NBA and WNBA. The 3 players that are most similar in terms of their position and stat package is actually Fagbenley, Harrison, and Sabally. They all play very similar, and obviously 2 have already played for her in the past. The interesting one is going to be Milic when she comes over, because she's actually she's proven internationally and with the WNBA that you can post her up a little bit and she can stretch the floor a little bit more than the other 3. So I think the 3 posts, I think, will all play fairly similar. And then Milic is sort of the wild card in what they do with her. And then even Aaliyah 9. Do they consider her more as a 4 or as a 3? I would assume, just based on what she's done, she's more of a stretch 3 than someone who's going to play the forward, but they might have to play her through the post. So we can go through some of the player personnel. Obviously, we get down into some of the people. You can see some of the numbers here. Marina Mabry, elite level scorer, elite level shooter, puts up great numbers. Her numbers were down a little bit from her career last year, just because I think Connecticut struggled a little bit, and I think she was forced to carry a lot more load than maybe she would otherwise. Sykes' numbers were interesting because they dipped a little bit when she moved from Washington to Seattle. It shoots the ball decently, but again, it's trying to get downhill. Both have good assist numbers. And then you can see through Kia Nurse, stretch floor as a 3, good movement off ball. And then I'm assuming those would be the 2 posts that you would work with.
Now, one thing, Nate, there too, just want to, describe to people is you mentioned Synergy before. So Synergy is a video system where teams download their games into Synergy, and Synergy breaks that down in terms of analytics, statistics, and other things. So both Nate and I in our university programs, Synergy is a common vehicle where we get our video and statistics and a lot of analytical information. The NBA uses it as well as obviously the WNBA. So, that's where some of our breakdowns, and you see some of these numbers and, the PPP, points per possession, et cetera, that we have on here in these breakdowns, that all comes from Synergy information that we get. So Nate's not compiling it at home. He's not up late working over his math in that regard. We're getting this information straight from an excellent source, which is Synergy.
I was going to tell people that you lock me in the office and I can't come out until I've actually broken down the whole roster.
That's another part of the pod. We'll get onto that later.
We'll get to that. But yeah, this would be the starting five that I would assume. But again, there's a bunch of different ways. And part of the reason we started with this as well is if you do go three guards, it might change very much the roster composition afterwards. I think if you start Alamond as well, you're going to have to bring in another point guard or another ball dominant guard who can come off the bench and spell them. I think with the three guard rotation, it just gives you way more flexibility with what you do with the other positions.
So Nate, if that is their starting five, what do you like about it?
I like the fact that their guards can create. You got multiple people that can use a ball screen. You have some posts that have shown that they can play a little bit through, how do I put this? Both of them do exceptionally well at setting screens and rolling. And a lot of their post-ups come after switches. Fegbenley and Sabally, both I think would rather face the rim a little bit and be able to attack from a dribble or two from mid-range. Both will post up against smaller players, but they're not really ones you're going to build your offense around throwing the ball in. So I think you have two ball-dominant guards that are really good using ball screens. You have Key, who can space the court, and you have two posts that can play in ball screen situations because that's where they've shown the most potential. I also think Sabally has shown some potential that she just hasn't been able to realize yet because of some of the injuries. But her at the Olympics, she was playing fantastic before she got banged up a little bit and wasn't able to play, I think, in a couple games. But I think it utilizes what their forwards do really well and some of what their guards do well. The other reason I like it too is because someone like Mabry, very similar in some respects to Sammy Whitcomb, who plays with Sandy with the Australian national team. So she's coached some of the similar players and then some of the players she's had before in the past. So I think they fit very much with the style of play that she's run.
Is this starting five competitive, do you think, to other WNBA teams? Where would you slot it if you had to say? Is it gonna, if we tiered the WNBA, say, into three tiers, is it competitive with the top tier of teams?
No. But I also think the WNBA is one of those weird ones where the top end teams are just stacked. Like it's really tough to break into those top two or three teams.
Can it be mid-level tier competitive?
Yes, but I would also say that based on what it currently is, maybe not. But I think there shows the potential to get in sort of that second group of teams because I don't think this roster is done. I think there's still a couple players out there that might move the needle a little bit. I mean, Missimum is one that obviously everyone's talking about. She's probably the best player not currently signed in the WNBA. If she was to come in and she changes very drastically what your forwards look like, and obviously she's played for Coach Brondello there in New York. She has some familiarity with Alamond because they play on the Belgium national team together. Is it realistic to think that she comes in? No, but I also think there's another post out there that they have the rights to that has not signed from the Russian league, who played in Minnesota last year. Her name escapes me. But she's someone who could definitely help with some of the rotation and some of the skills to the forwards. I think they show the potential at the guard spots and like the 1, 2, 3 that they could do really well and maybe get into that second group, maybe not challenge the top end teams. I just think the forwards, we don't know what they're going to look like exactly yet.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, what do you think, some of the negatives are here? Like obviously maybe the forwards, you're not sure about what they're going to look like. Are they going to be able to rebound the ball? Are they going to be able to match up with other teams that have dominant bigs or potential post threats?
I think to some extent they will be, but just some of the rebounding numbers aren't great. Like, Temi Fegbenley is probably their best post, and she averaged 5 rebounds a game last year in the WNBA. She's not that dominant rebounder. However, she's an exceptional defender. She's athletic enough that she can switch onto guards or she can keep people in front of her. She's active enough that she can guard in the post and defend the rim. I think some of their other posts are smart and physical and willing to do the part. They're just going to have to do it as a unit. I'm not necessarily sure they have one really strong rebounder, and I do think the guards are going to have to get involved. And they have some interesting options there at that 3 spot. So I do think that there's some concern, especially in rebounding. I think defensively are all right, but again, again, when you look at some of the points, like 7.4 points from Fegbenli. I know Sabali and Harrison are both around 5 points each. You get into Milic, who hasn't played in the league in a couple of years, is maybe more of a natural scorer. But even when she was in the WNBA, she wasn't a top scoring big. I just think that there's an imbalance right now between their guard depth and their wings compared to what their forwards are. I think they have some forwards, but we're going to need to see Sabali step up. And I think there's still one more piece out there that we don't know about yet.
How about some bench pieces there, if you can scroll down?
Let's scroll down the bench. This is what I assume, and there's a couple players that I'm going to make an argument for, and obviously I'm just talking to you. I'm sure that the tempo isn't going to run this back to be able to see, oh, this is what Nate said. I think Alamond would be a fantastic guard off the bench in the 3-guard rotation. I think Rice is really interested coming off the bench as well as another player who can use a ball screen. Doesn't shoot it great, but sort of can create for others. Very good in transition, but can use a ball screen as well. Conde is the one that I would really advocate for, that I'm not necessarily sure a lot of North Americans know about. She did play at Florida State for a short period of time before she went back overseas to play pro. Very accomplished in the Euro League, very accomplished with the Spanish national team, but she's a big guard that she's great at creating for others. She can score well enough on her own. She's got a great feel. She is coming off an Achilles injury from last year, and I think she's going to get better and better if given the opportunity. But I think she's really someone who could be special in that second unit. And as you bring someone more of those ball dominant guards on, she's a big wing that can use ball screens and create for others. And then Harrison, obviously, is a pro, has been a pro for a long time, has got experience with Coach Brondello's offense. And then Milic is one who hasn't played in a couple of years, but she is someone that you can post up and then you can play through her, and she can step out and score. I think defensively she'd be a little bit of a step back from the others, but she actually might have the most offensive potential as anyone, unless Sabali can take a big step forward. So that was what I would assume is sort of the next 5. But I'm interested to see what you think of Conde, especially as we start to look at some of her videos, because she's a wild card to me. I think she could be fantastic if she's given an opportunity.
Yeah, I guess, one of those, let's wait and see how she fits in, not only to, the league, but the way of play that the team's going to select. Interesting enough, and people, whether you're tuning into WNBA for the first time because you're interested in the local team or the Canada's team with the tempo, we play, WNBA plays FIBA rules. So we have a 40-minute game. There's difference in timeouts. So if you're used to watching the NBA with the million timeouts that they have, and a 48-minute game is what the NBA plays. We're more into the FIBA international brand of basketball here, which generally, in most cases, has a little bit less of a whistle, not as many fouls called in general. Might be a little bit rougher. I know a lot of comments the last few years in general with the WNBA was it's a little too rough, maybe too much contact, not letting some of the stars sort of be stars, or let the ball handling play off the dribble happen a little bit as much as it should without some whistles. We'll see what they're going to call it like this year. But, as you take a look at some of these stats, understand obviously that it's a 40-minute in FIBA game, I guess is my point. So you've got essentially there, and sorry, one of my points I meant to say as well with FIBA, in FIBA, can you play 10? Can you play 11 players? Obviously, through the course of a season, you're going to need that depth. But in one, any particular game, you're in the playoffs, you're in a all have to win at all costs kind of game. You could probably get away with playing 8 or 9 potentially in a FIBA style of game. But so as we get a little bit more deeper in here, we might be getting to these people are competing maybe with the bench players, or just maybe competing to get a roster spot, right?
And it's interesting too. I know what you mean as far as like all things being equal. If you got your 12, do you need to get to your 11th or 12th in a game? I think the bigger thing is with the WNBA is they haven't had a lot of those developmental positions. And this year is going to be different with having those 2 development positions. So like you've had teams that have run through whole parts of their season with like 8 players.
So just explain that, Nate, for people who we're tuning in. So how is that change going to be different this year?
So traditionally, they've been allowed 12 players on their roster. So when people have been injured, you've been able to apply for I forget what it's called, but you've been able to bring in
Hardship, I
players.
think it was
Hardship, yeah. You've been able to
Yep.
bring in people for a short amount of time, but a lot of times, if you're not able to bring people in, or it's a point in your season where you can't integrate someone, they'll go into games with like 8 or 9 players on a roster. So you might not necessarily have to play 10, 11, 12 every single game, but at some point, those 12 players are going to make a contribution over the course of the season. This is also an interesting season because they've allowed 2 development positions. Now, there's certain rules about who can qualify for that. I think you have to be under 3 years and under a certain amount of minutes to be able to qualify. And contracts are a little bit smaller, but at least it gives 2 people extra in practice that you can bring in during injuries, which I think is going to help the league tremendously. The other strange thing about this year is you also have the World Championships coming up in September. So there's actually going to be a break as well. So the season's a little bit more condensed. It's crazy to think that camp started last week. They're going to play 2 exhibition games, and on May 8th, they're going to start the regular season. Like, it is a sprint. So you're right. You might be able to get away with an individual game where you're playing less, but all 12 players and probably all 14 players are going to play a major role at some point in the season. So you can't just store people at the end of your bench. Like, at some point, they are going to contribute.
Yeah, so again, as we take a look at the last bits on the roster here, we may see some of these over the course of the season. Maybe some of these are going to surprise to make the team. But definitely the potential of some of these, maybe getting some minutes at some point, as you mentioned, for the tempo this season.
Yeah, and then the last 2 players I said, so we've gone through 10, is just Laxa and Nye. Laxa has been a pro overseas. She did play at South Florida and put up huge numbers there. She plays with Familia Schio, Italian team, played in the EuroLeague this year. She's just flat out, like, she can shoot it. Like, just deep range. She can come off screens. She can shoot from everywhere on the court. And funny enough, the person who's probably closest to her in terms of stat package happens to be Leah Nye. So I think you're 11th and 12th, bringing in 2 sort of longer shooters, especially since you have so many people that can create in ball screen situations and in different ways. It's just nice to have a couple people that can be flexible and be able to shoot the ball. And I do think at times Nye is going to have to play that 4 spot. And having a pick and pop post is a nice little change from what they have. So if I had to say these are the 12 players, this is what I would do. I'm sure it's going to be affected by what they decide to do with the starting lineup. And there's probably a couple more players that are going to be in the mix. Lexi Held, someone who's played overseas for quite a while. She had a successful year last year with Phoenix, pretty good in ball screen as well. So if you go a little bit smaller, she might be a good person to bring in because similar type player where you can play her at the 1, play her a little bit at the 2, but she can create off a ball screen. Christy Wallace is someone who's had a successful career in the WNBA, did not play last year and was playing in New Zealand most recently. So I don't know. I think it might be a little bit of a stretch for her, but her advantage is obviously she's played for Coach Brondello with the Australian national team.
Interesting there too, like, you're an expansion franchise. Obviously the current WNBA with their contract negotiations, this year, they're talking potentially about, pushing back the season. None of that occurred. We're on slate to start when it should. To be an expansion franchise with potentially cutting, WNBA experienced players and some people that maybe have some potential to see them recirculate throughout the WNBA or potentially get onto other teams. I mean, that's probably not that bad. That might speak to the competitiveness you might see out of the tempo this season. I mean, expectations are going to be low as an expansion franchise. The fan base, I hope is going to understand that, which they should. But at the same time, with what was it, 80% of the league being free agents with this new contract, it really put the WNBA in a unique situation to have players not only return with current teams, but maybe get poached and free agents signed by other teams as well. And, this is an interesting roster construction, I think, that they're going to have to put together, make some decisions on, and unfortunately going to have to let some of these go. As we talked about earlier, the WNBA had a lot of injuries last year with a lot of teams. So don't count some of these faces out. You may see them recirculate, not only with the tempo, but they may creep up on other teams. Depending on the wear and tear of the season, you may see some of these players creep up against the tempo, maybe at some point later on in the season too. So always an interesting season. The sprint, as you said, is on to get to the start of the season. But then, as we get into the dog days later on, there's going to be the grind part and injuries and bodies and how many people are going to be able to play are going to be a big part of depth and signings and front offices making some of these decisions.
But even think about this, like in what other league do you have half your tour, was it 6 players from your training camp coming in late because they're playing in another league? Like they're literally at the end of their season right now. They've gone through long domestic seasons. They've gone through the Euro League. Like it'd just be interesting to see what the NBA would be like if you literally had players finishing one season and then just sprinting to get involved in the next. And, even the projections that I've made, Lexi Held, like she played 15 minutes a game last year for a team that was actually in the WNBA finals. So like, I do think in some respects you can make the argument that Tempo are going to be very competitive because you're going to have to cut established pros or find a way to stash a player or two in that development positions to be able to make room for them. So I do think that they should be commended for the depth of talent. I'm just worried about composition, especially those forward spots to take that next step.
Yeah, and to speak on that as well with that depth of talent, the strength of this roster, as mentioned, is going to be their guard play. They're going to go as far as their guard play is going to take them, and that's the way they're going to be built, it looks like at this point. And not only being able to withstand a long season with that depth, but, during each game, they're going to have to do the heavy lifting in most cases, particularly from an offensive standpoint. So, are their systems going to reflect that? We'll see very quickly.
And one thing I will say is Coach Brondello is very much known for having her style of play. Like I think she can be flexible based on the personnel in it, but I think there's some things that she's shown with the Australian national team, with New York, with some of the other teams that she's been involved with, that they run. She's very knowledgeable in the system that they run. She knows the adjustments to make based on her personnel, but I think it's fairly simple to see how some of these players fit into what she's done. So I think we can anticipate a little bit from what we know of her and what they've released in some of the social media posts from training camp about what they're going to do. And we'll go into systems in a little bit, but why don't we look a little bit more at the players and go through maybe some video to show people exactly what we're talking about. We've gone through sort of the paper copy in terms of what we assume the roster will look like, but we're going to go through some more specific players to try to provide a little bit of at least a visual look of what the roster could look like. So we're going to go through some of the guards first. And first player we're going to take a look at is Marina Mabrey. Marina Mabrey, she's a pro. Like, she's really had a great NBA or WNBA career. Really high usage in ball screen and in off ball screen. And the one thing that she does exceptionally well is she shoots the ball exceptionally well. And actually off the dribble, she might even be better and shoots a ton of contested jump shots. But there are very few players in this league that do as good a job of shooting the basketball in numerous types of ways, coming off ball screens and otherwise, and especially off the dribble. And you can see here in some of what she's doing, little step backs, little runners, very creative in getting her own shot. Now, you get a chance to watch her play much last year, Brad?
A little bit with Connecticut, as you're slowing down the film here, which is good. I think what we're going to wind up seeing, and again, she's obviously, I think, known primarily as a shooter. With that shooting, you're going to see it's going to be very difficult to play ball screen situations, because defensively, when you're in ball screen situations and the individual who's using the ball screen, who is the ball handler, if they can shoot it, there's going to have to be some basic decisions defensively that are going to have to be made there. You have to anticipate and defend against her shot, which then is going to leave something else open. So we'll get to a little bit later, but Coach Brondello's style, a lot of open post action, which means there's not a lot of dead post-ups, which means the 5s and the 4s and people are not like posting up on the block or at the basket. They're going to leave that area open for cutters, for rollers. So some 5-out action. If she's going to be involved in a lot of ball screen, as we've seen here from the clips, there could be, you're going to have to pick your poison. Are you going to worry about the roll action? Are you going to worry about her handling and shooting it off of that? So I think, one, as a player, as we get to maybe some Coach Brondello action a little bit later, talk about that, I think she fits very well within that. I think at New York last year with Ionescu, again, Ionescu, a tremendous, one of the best shooters in the WNBA. They ran a lot of ball screen, pick and roll action, and I say those interchangeably, those terms, ball screen and pick and roll, with Ionescu. And again, because of her shooting ability, you're going to have to pick your poison. I think Mayberry much is like that. Maybe not as top tier a player as Ionescu, but very familiar and would be very similar in these situations.
And I think she fits the same profile as Sammy Wickham, like I said before. Sammy Wickham plays for Coach Brondello with the Australian national team. Elite level shooter, can play on ball or off ball. But one thing that I think is unique to Mabry is she can really score at all three levels. Like, she shoots a ton of contested shots. She shoots a ton of shots off the dribble. She shoots a very good percentage. I know last year with Connecticut, I think she's going to have more help this year, and I think it's going to alleviate some of the pressure on her. But the other thing is she actually finishes really well around the rim, and she does it not necessarily with like pure athleticism. It's changes speeds and being crafty with her dribble. And then the other piece is she'll just bully you. Like, she's a very aggressive player, and sometimes if she creates an advantage, she's just going to get downhill. And I think the last two clips is the change of pace. You can see some of her creativity to be able to finish. And then the last one is just catching the ball on the wing and getting downhill, smaller player, and just finishing through people's bodies. So I think she can finish at three levels. I think as the talent gets better around her, I think she'll get better and better. And she's had a great pro career and has really gotten better each and every year in some of what she's able to do. So I have a lot of respect for what she's been able to do since she left Notre Dame.
In this day and age, with obviously the new contract that the WNBA and Players Association went through this year, pile of free agents, there's a lot of one-year contracts. There's very few 3-year contracts. But I think what we're seeing here, especially with Mayberry, is they think she's going to be a cornerstone, obviously, a potential all-star candidate for their team, and they're making that 2-year commitment to her. And like you said, she was the first answer to a Trivial Pursuit trivia question: who was the first $1 million player signed in the WNBA? It's her for sure. So great clips there. Looking forward to watching her explosiveness on the offensive end and contributing at that end for sure.
No doubt. And then next one we're going to go through is Brittany Sykes. Long WNBA career, very much known as a defensive player, but offensively, really good in ball screen and transition. Those are the two areas that she excels in. Now, she approaches it very differently. She's one that's trying to change her speed and use her athleticism to get to the rim. Like, she's trying to get downhill. She is a good passer, but she's not someone who's hunting her jump shot an awful lot in ball screen situations. So you can see a couple different ways. Pretty solid passer, good vision, good control, but a lot of time in ball screens, like, she's looking to get downhill. And she finishes well at the rim. I mean, she's only probably about 5'9", but extends well, finishes outside of her body. She's very difficult to keep in front. And even though she's not, how do I put this? She's not the most physically intimidating person. She'll still play through contact. And you can see through some of her transition clips that, yeah, she's willing to be able to be physical to finish at the rim, but very crafty, very difficult to keep in front. The one thing I will say is, especially if she's playing off of Mabry, she'll shoot open threes. She made a good percentage this year, but that's not something that she's done exceptionally well in the past.
She's got incredible wingspan for her size, and I think that wingspan plays into her outstanding defensive abilities at the defensive end. We're probably going to say that Mayberry, too, probably not known for her defensive prowess at that end of the floor. So pairing these two, I think roster construction-wise makes a lot of sense. You can have one take a little bit more of the defensive burden and contribute, obviously, offensively, as we've shown from these clips, too. But Mayberry probably takes more of the offensive burden, maybe a little bit. So it'll be really interesting to see these two in the backcourt. A lot of WNBA experience there. Two very accomplished players. Again, as an expansion team, I mean, it's probably going to be difficult to get these two caliber of players in your first year of existence as your franchise. So I think the Tempo are going to be pretty lucky there, and fans are going to be excited to see these two play.
And I think the other piece, too, is that with Brondello's style of coaching, there's usually multiple ball screens in a possession. I know she runs some European continuous ball screen offense that we'll probably talk about in future podcasts. She does some of the Thomas Huala stuff, which again is multiple ball screens. And some of their flow concepts or their offensive concepts is just ball screen on one side, ball screen on the next side, all dependent on where their forwards are. So having multiple people to use a ball screen is a huge plus in some of what she's put in the past. Now, third guard, very easily start if you wanted to go small. Julie Allemond, one of the top assists numbers-wise in the WNBA last year with Los Angeles. I've actually seen her play since she was a junior national team player. My first national team experience at the World Championships, she was playing with the Belgium national team. And she's someone I can honestly say every place that I've seen her play, she just makes others around her better. And she's actually was just MVP of EuroLeague Final 6. So the top non-WNBA league in the world, she was just MVP of their championship series. So someone who's very well accomplished, someone who's very well respected, especially internationally, but still relatively new in the WNBA because she hasn't always played in the W.
Now she's from Belgium too, so she should fit in because she parlait un peu de français as well, I think, right?
And if she can bring her buddy Messamum, she's already paid for her own contract, but I won't put that on her to recruit. But watch a couple clips. Little different than the other two guards. She's attacking to pass. There's not a lot of fancy to what she does, just makes good decisions, finds open players, plays an awful lot in ball screen and transition. A bunch of different ways to pass. Might be a little bit better passing with her right than her left hand. Does a good job of creating a little bit of separation in ball screen situations to create advantages, but is more of like an opportunistic scorer. She'll shoot the ball a little bit, but she really wants to create an advantage and find an open teammate. That's where she's at her best.
So what you're saying there, sorry to cut you off, what you're saying there, you consider her, I think, what coaches might call a little bit more of a system player. And what I mean by a system player is, she may not be breaking a lot of individual defenders down one-on-one or creating opportunities for defenses to double team or rotate because she's just going to break people down one-on-one. She's going to work out a ball screen. She's going to pick her moments. She's going to use teammates. And as you've seen from those clips, some excellent passes out of ball screen situations to open teammates. Would you agree with that? Maybe categorize more as a system player?
Yeah. And again, she can score, but it's like she's going to shoot open threes. If you fall asleep and don't respect her coming off ball screen, she'll look to score. And she finishes well at the rim, especially for a smaller player. She just doesn't take forced shots. Mabry is going to shoot contested. Mabry is going to create her own. She's going to take some tough shots. Almond just doesn't take tough shots.
So I was going to say, interesting as well, she probably has the ability not only to play with the ball, but also could space off the ball because she shoots it so well.
She shoots it okay from three. Funny enough, she actually finishes maybe better at the rim. But again, she's not going to hunt her shot. And she will be a little streaky at times. There's times when she looks like a great shooter, and there's times when it sort of averages out. Last couple clips are her shooting the ball or scoring. Got good form. She's a little bit hesitant about it, but she will go on streaks. And then again, if you don't pay attention to her, she finds ways to score and finishes well at the rim as a smaller player. All right, next player is actually someone I'm really happy is here. So when they went through the WNBA college draft or entrance draft, she was one that I thought would potentially still be there at 6 when they picked. And she was the one I was really hoping that they wouldn't pass on. She was the #1 player in her recruiting class coming out of high school. I remember competing against her in the Nike EYBL, which is the AAU league. She competed for a team out of Virginia. She's had an incredibly successful college career at UCLA, just won a national championship. And she's someone that I think people really love playing with. She was someone that they used an awful lot recruitment to build the team around her. She's someone who makes other people better and can play in a bunch of different ways. So I'm excited to see her progression as a WNBA player. I'm not necessarily sure she's Rookie of the Year, but I think she's definitely an all-rookie member. And I think she has a great first year because she can be very versatile too. So we'll show some of what she does. So not a great shooter, but we'll shoot it when it's there. But she has really good size, athleticism, and is willing to play through contact. So she can see over smaller players. She plays on balance, which allows her to be a good ball screen player. She's also one that can score very well at the rim and will play through contact when finishing. So I think she's going to be a little bit more like Sykes, where she's trying to get to the rim, and another player who can finish over taller people because of her length and because of her physicality. I do think when it comes to shooting, she shoots a little bit better off the bounce. You can see she really elevates on her shot. Can finish through a little bit of contact even through the mid-range. Outside shooting, I think she's going to be someone that people help off of and make her prove that she can shoot it at this level to really be consistent. And the last clip, I'll show you a couple clips in transition, again, creating an advantage with her athleticism and then finishing through contact to the rim with both hands. And you see she'll go right and left on stuff and will finish through contact. Does a great job of keeping her head up. We'll make a little bit of quick move, a little change of pace, get there and finish through contact. This is where it's going to determine whether or not she's a successful pro. You can see here Lauren Betts, who now plays in Washington, was one of her teammates that won a national championship with. They had, 6 players that were drafted into the WNBA this year. Every player that scored in the national championship game was a senior. But you can see that they chose to help off of her. I think this is where people are going to pick on her a little bit, and she's going to make enough jump shots to really force people to play her. And the shot has a little bit of a hitch to it. She does hit a good percentage, but she just won't shoot it unless it's open. So that's the one downside of her being out there on the court. I think she does everything else really, really well.
Interesting difference there between her and Alaman. Particularly if they're coming off the bench. As we stated with Alaman, a little bit smaller, more system-oriented, more play within the system, very capable open shooter in most situations, whereas Rice maybe a little bit more physical, a little bit bigger guard, maybe not as great a shooter, but, is going to stick her nose in on some things, maybe rebound a little bit better at both ends. So an interesting situation where you have two different style of guards potentially coming off the bench there to give you some different looks as well.
And I think they'll actually play well together. I think in the half court, obviously you're going to have another player out there to stretch the court, try to give them a little bit of space to play. But I think both of them actually play really well in transition. So in some respects, if you went Alamond and Rice coming off the bench, I think that would be a really interesting duo as far as attacking in transition, pushing tempo. And when we come to wings, I think this is where some of their shooting comes in. Now, I'll admit I'm completely partial on Kia. I'll be the one that's biased about her. I have a tremendous amount of respect for her as a pro, and I've known her for quite a long time. And I do think she fits because the one thing that she does exceptionally well right now, she spaces the court. And you can see in a lot of the clips, people identify her as catch and shoot shooter. She'll actually force players not to help or not to come over to the ball nearly as much. And if you're late on closeout, she's gotten a lot better at using a dribble or two to create a three off of that. I also think that, this is where she's at her best. If she can catch, even on a closeout, Stewie, there's a great defender, really, really long. She's still able to shoot over top. Just quick catch and release on balance and be able to shoot the ball. In some of the other clips, I think she's a smart player finding her own shot. You can see she can move without the basketball. You can see people flying at her because that's essentially what she does well. And then the other thing, especially if you're playing with a couple of players who play in transition, this is something that she's always done well and just had a great feel. As soon as she sees that her team has the ball, it's a full sprint to the other end. And it's amazing how many times she can leak out and get in. She always used to get one or two, and she still gets a couple every now and then, just running hard in transition. So running in transition, spacing the court, I think she would be an additive member of their team in terms of really providing space for other players to play.
Yeah, great experience coming off the bench there. Obviously, one of the best players Canada's ever produced for sure. And, it's going to have the fan base all crazy for their local Canadian, growing up in Hamilton, etc. She's not far. And, I think she definitely can provide some great outside shooting and some spelling there. Defensively, she may have a little bit of issues covering at the other end of the floor. It'll be interesting to see what they do there. But definitely someone the Canadian fan base should be recognized and would recognize rather. And I just think you've got her in the starting lineup there. My guess would be she probably starts out like that, but maybe over the course of the season she might move more to off the bench. But again, going to be unbelievable in the locker room and behind the scenes, and brings a pile of experience, and I think a great addition to the tempo for this season.
First podcast, 1 for 1 in technical difficulties, but we're back up and going and in perfect time because we're talking about one of my favorite players that the Tempo drafted in their expansion draft. So Maria Conde, again, is a very accomplished European player, very accomplished with the EuroLeague, played in Italy this past year, very accomplished with the Spanish national team. She's unique in the fact that she is a long wing that can create for others in ball screen situations. And I think she'd be a perfect player to play off the bench and that you can still run offense through. And those are really unique within the WNBA or any league. So we'll show some clips primarily of her playing with the Spanish national team, but obviously she does this in her pro context as well. She's number 10 there. You can see involved in a little bit of horns and eventually into ball screen. But because she's 6'1" and a creative passer, she sees over defenses. She can sort of find different paths and different angles to make passes that smaller players just can't. And she'd be very different than some of the ball screen players that the Tempo currently have, and just a very different look off the bench. There she's playing with Gustafsson, who's been a long time WNBA player. Again, number 10 here, getting the ball screen from Gustafsson. But the skip pass and the vision to be able to see that is something that you're not going to find from a lot of players regardless of position. You can even see here that little look away to the post and the find in the corner. She's got a creativity in passing that I just not sure a lot of North American players have. Doesn't always lead to an assist, but she's very good at being able to find the advantage and continuing the play. She can create her own shot, and because she's relatively big and a good athlete, She can get over top in pull-up situations. And again, she's not a great shooter, but when she's on, she shows a good stroke. And when she's feeling it, she will get streaky and find ways to finish. And then attacking the rim, a bunch of creative ways to finish, either through contact or using her length to be able to find little pull-ups or little fadeaways. So she's a very creative player in ball screen situations. It can also create a little bit for herself. The one thing I will admit, she will turn the ball over. Her turnovers are fairly high. Sometimes she'll take a routine pass and try to get a little bit too creative with it. And so there is a little bit of a downside. But I think in shorter minutes, especially coming off the bench, she'd be a huge weapon for them to find in some ball screen situations and able to create for others. Have you had a chance to watch Conde play very much, or is this sort of the first clips you've seen of her?
I have not. I have not seen her play yet. But again, you've got a big guard that can pass, get into the paint. Be really interesting to see her. So again, like if the Tempo able to have her on the roster, just another guard that you can put in some ball screen situations. And, can you imagine, we could foresee a roster with the Tempo playing 3 guards potentially at the same time, all with ball screen pick and roll capability, which means you can attack matchups. So, playing particular team, great defenders on a couple of them. Well, maybe you go at, one of the others with a lesser option on the floor to break it down. So, and as we've seen with Coach Brondello too, lots of ball screen actions in teams she runs with Australia, and in particular with the Liberty last year, the New York Liberty. So, if there is going to be those components in the Tempo offense this year, just more options, which is a good thing.
I think they have the depth of talent to be able to play 2 people that can create in ball screen at all times. I don't think they have a lot of people that can create in other ways. I know some can create in off-ball situations, but I do think it's really a huge benefit to them that they always have people that can create. Now, the other wings that we've talked a little bit about, Laxa and Nye, which I anticipated sort of be your 11th or 12th, just straight shooters. They don't need a lot of space. They can find their balance really quickly. There was Laxa, just quickly catch and shoot. Nye, very much the same thing, spreading the court and just providing space for others to play. And you have to close out long on them because they're both over 6 feet, so they're able to get shots. The other thing, too, is you can run them off ball screens a little bit. Again, I mean, this is a tough screen to be able to shoot off of, and you can see how quickly it gets out of her hands there in Laxa. Very similar in Nye. Nye might be a little bit better at getting to the rim and using her athleticism. Laxa is a little bit more mid-range, but I think both have shown the ability through their college careers and through their WNBA and pro careers that they can make jump shots. And I think having players like that, especially when you have so many people that can create off ball screens, just makes everyone way more dangerous.
Well, if you're going to run any ball screen offense, particularly a spread ball screen offense, or not have the post open and not having people space low in particular and leaving it for cutters, you need shooters. So there's always place for shooters. The big question is, with a shooter, can you do anything else? Mm-hmm. Are you just strictly a shooter? Can you rebound a little bit? Can you defend a little bit? Can we pass in situations? Can you defend penetration? Those are always the questions. Sometimes they're answered, sometimes they're not answered. So again, we'll see it in terms of these players. Are they able to crack the lineup? But again, definitely could be players that we may see on other WNBA rosters.
And I think Laxa is a little bit more of an accomplished shooter. It's an interesting one because they say she's a guard and forward. So I think there could be some times when you play a little bit of small ball where she slides to 4. I'm not sure Conde or Laxa can do it. I'm not sure I put Rice or Nurse in that situation. So Nye might have the most flexibility in terms of positioning if they wanted to go smaller at the 4.
And depending too on what some coaches particularly want, sometimes if the debates go on and on about who do you want maybe as your 11th or 12th or 10th player on your roster. Do you want a specialist? Maybe we need a shooter specialist. Maybe we don't feel comfortable about others shooting. Maybe we're going to see some zone. Maybe there's going to be some defenses. We need to stretch the floor. We need to get one of our players downhill. And some coaches and GMs or teams as a whole may just want to plug that in with a shooter. So up obviously to roster construction there.
Yeah. Now the forwards I sort of grouped together, partially because I think they do some very similar things. All of them will catch on the perimeter and get into quick little DHO or dribble handoffs, little ball screen situations. They're not players you're going to run offense through, whether it be in the low post or perimeter. All three do a really good job of rolling. They're not really pick and pop players. They're more sort of roll. Fegbenley's probably the best at catching the ball mid-range and creating off the dribble. Sabley is very physical in some of her finishing. Harrison's probably a little bit more of a passer. Sabley's probably the best offensive rebounder out of all of them. But as far as their statistical makeup goes, actually even Synergy grouped the three of them together as statistically the three most similar players at their position. Obviously, Sabley and Harrison have also played for Coach Brondello before, so the learning curve is a lot steeper with them just because they've already been through her system. So we'll show some clips of all three as we go through here. First couple, you can sort of see them catching on the perimeter. They're not really accomplished shooters from the outside. They'll make a couple, but just not high percentage. Again, they will shoot, but they're not pick and pop players. They're ones that are going to be on the perimeter that shoot when it's there, but not necessarily looking for it. In ball screen situations, a lot of their post-ups are after ball screens because of matchups. They'll exploit against guards if they can get switched onto, but they're not ones that you're going to run offense through necessarily in the post. And you can see there, ball screen led to a switch. Harrison's able to finish against the smaller player. Here we have Fegbenley. Ball gets inside. She can go to work against a smaller player, but you're not going to throw it against the traditional 4s and 5s. This is really where they excel. And Fegbenley especially, if she can catch the ball going to the rim in space, very good athlete, plays through contact and finish. Here you can see, I believe it is Sabley. Same thing. Again, this is where they excel, is sort of setting screens, rolling, and putting some pressure on the rim. Anything on the perimeter is just simple, like DHOs, keep the ball moving, but they're not going to create for themselves. They're just trying to create space for some of the guards to play off of. So I'm not sure that you're going to get really excited, but I think all three are solid pros, but all have a very similar skill package.
Definitely some good targets there off of ball screen rolls. I mean, they got some size, they got some length. As long as they can catch, in short roll or long roll to the rim situations right there. I mean, as long as that target is good and they can just make the simple passes, and keep the offense going, they can be very useful in a ball screen game because you don't need to be particularly skilled or maybe skilled in the perimeter. We can use that pressure on the rim with that roll or even short roll situations. And as long as you can just recognize, like I said, that one pass out or that open player, it's going to put pressure on the defense.
Yeah, I think they're solid pros. I just don't think that they're going to carry a team. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on our guards to create a lot for themselves and for others. But again, I think if you added another player, I think it actually becomes a very strong group. You just need someone with a little bit different skill set. Milic is the other one. She hasn't played in the WNBA for a little bit, long-time European pro out of Serbia. She's someone that could potentially add a little bit more, and it'll be interesting to see if she gets the opportunity. She's one you can throw the ball in a post, even if she's not necessarily in a mismatch. She can post up 4s and 5s in this league. Very physical, very aggressive when she catches the ball, plays through contact, but she can create an advantage in a post-up situation against a lot of people, even at her own position. And then the other thing that's sort of unique to her is that she can shoot the ball really well too. So you have a player you can run offense through, allow her to create one-on-one. Maisha Hines-Allen there, strong post defender. She's still able to find a creative way to get the ball off. And you can see here, as people start to help off of her, as posts start to get dragged towards the rim, quick shot, quick release, nice touch on her shot. So she can score in a number of different ways. And here you can even see her popping out to the corner to create space. So she is a little bit of a different matchup. Now, I haven't seen her play in a little while. I think if she's at her best, she could. But I'm interested to see how she matches up and if she can get some time through the preseason to see if we can see her play.
And again, in terms of what they're going to take and look, obviously we're in we're in a very weird situation with some of these players that haven't even reported to camp yet. When are they going to report to camp? How acclimatized can they get right away? When do roster decisions have to be made by the league? Are they going to be here long enough? So interesting situation that they're put in. We'll see how that works out. But that's more than likely she's going to be Milic going to be your best pick and pop opportunity. You're able to stretch the floor. So do you want to have a variety of bigs that can do different things? You know, maybe we have one that doesn't pick and pop. Do we want to add one that does? Decisions, obviously, that are going to be tough, but they're going to have to make with some of this criteria involved.
And if you look at our Australian teams, they play a bunch of stretch bigs. They pick and pop with a lot of their players. So I think in some respects, just having a little bit different post that can do some of that, I think she's going to be someone that they're definitely looking towards. We are going to look a little bit at systems, and I think we're going to look at more systems as the season goes on and we see a little bit more of what they do. Based on what the Tempo have shared online, based on some stuff of what we've seen Coach Brondello's teams in New York and Australia do, we put together some really basic concepts or basic actions that they use. I'm going to try to break down some of the smaller details. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more of what they do, but why don't we take a look a little bit at some of the systems that they might run or what people might be able to take a look as they start to get into the first preseason game. And it's also concepts I know you use within your team, and there's some stuff that we do as well. So it's not unfamiliar to us at the university level as well. First concept, spread ball screen. Some of the points that we've looked at is how they create space, especially for the ball handler. I have no doubt that they'll be looking for post rolls. But I think the biggest thing is, are they able to create some space so that people are able to create off the bounce a little bit there. First action we're going to look at is spread ball screen, something that I know you guys use a fair bit, something that we use as well. I know Coach Brondello has used it an awful lot with her Australian teams, with the New York team. Nescu was someone that she played an awful lot with this last year, but still played a little bit with Natasha Cloud as well. I'm sure it's going to be an action they use. There's going to be times when they have ball reversal and playing to the second side and third side on this, but we focused on sort of just a spread high ball screen in isolation. And we started to look a little bit about how they create space, especially for the ball handler. So first couple clips we're going to watch is a spread ball screen. And you can talk a little bit about sort of the spacing they have.
Again, in a spread ball screen, you're going to want, as we can see here, you're going to want players in the corners. We're going to stretch the court as much as we can. Again, that open post concept, there's going to be no spacer around the rim because we're going to put pressure on the rim with that roller. So the ball screener, as we can see here, is going to roll to the basket and put pressure on the rim that way. So this other player starting to move up top. This ball handler's probably, taking the screen not terribly tight to the ball screen itself, but they're going to try to access the middle of the floor off this ball screen. As we can see from some of these clips, in Australia's actions here, they're going to send a cutter through as well. So in a spread, there's usually 4 players on the perimeter, and then the one ball handler, so all 5 are on the perimeter. But then that one ball screener is going to roll hard to the basket, as we're going to see here with a cutter.
And I've called it a back cut 45. I know people call it different things. I forget what you guys call it.
We refer to the cut that's being made off the top player right here. We would call that a burn cut.
And the big reason why is teams have gotten really good at putting gap protection in. So you can see specifically there's Aaliyah Edwards on the Canadian team who's sort of guarding an elbow. It might even be over a little bit more on a nail against other teams. Teams have gotten so good at being able to protect the rim with initial help that if you're not able to create space, you're just not allowed to get downhill and really put pressure on defenses. So a couple clips we see, you can see that back cut and then just being able to play and get downhill. They're not necessarily always successful, but they are trying to open up space for the ball to be able to play, and then obviously have a post roll into space. Here you can see probably a better version, creates all sorts of space for the ball to play, but even they're trying to get into that gap protection for the person off the corner, and especially with shooters in the corner, it just creates all sorts of room. A couple more.
So just one point before on one of those last ones as well. I think one of those spread ball screens was at a transition. Is that something that the Tempo are going to incorporate out of their transition offense? Obviously, you can run it as quarter court offense, as we see right here. So there's some different options. And it might depend on players. So right here, we've got, they're probably playing, because they have a 5 that can shoot at interesting spacing. It looks like they either 5 in the opposite corner. And Stewie, the, perennial, one of the better players in the WNBA, setting the ball screen there. So a luxury there to be able to pick who you're setting the ball screen with, because your 5 is actually a very good shooter and you can space. So again, manipulating some of the defense, creating some interesting situations where let's put their 5 on the perimeter to defend rather than on the ball screen. Put someone else in some of the ball screen action. So again, it's very versatile. Again, as you continue the clips here, as we go through, one of them was in transition. It can be in the quarter court. You can manipulate the pieces around offensively to give it a bit of a different look. Flea action, what we would refer to as flea action, is it may look like a double ball screen. As you can see, the player just crossed half court is going to ball screen right here. The woman, I believe that's number 22, who's just off the elbow, her foot's kind of on the 3-point line. She may be giving the appearance like she's setting a double ball screen. A lot of professional teams would call this 77. Okay, 77 is a double ball screen where you'd have a big setting and then you'd probably have a guard or a shooter setting. In this situation, the post is setting the first screen. The guard won't really set the screen. It's kind of a fake. They're going to loop under. Where the ball handler is right now, but a little bit lower, because you'd probably want this screen a little bit lower if you could, and again, on how the defense plays it. Number 22 is going to loop in back of that ball handler to put that defensive player in a very unique kind of situation defensively. You know, you're going to look at the scouting report. If 22 is a very good shooter, the scouting report says we're not going to let her shoot the three. Maybe we're going to crowd her in defensive situations. So she's going to take away extra help, or what we might refer to as zone up help. Because in some ball screen situations defensively, the defense usually zones up, which means you're still covering your individual defender, but you're going to zone up more. You're going to shrink the court more and go more into the key or toward the basket. So if you had great shooters out there, they're more difficult to defend once the ball gets moving. So if we start the clip here, okay, here comes the ball screen. See how she loops under. Okay, and obviously that screen was excellent because they sent the defender back to half court there. You can play a little 5-on-4 at this scenario, and there's the roll. Now we got to that's where this post has to make a good decision. You see she's very patient there. Actually winds up being a traveler 3 in the key, but that's where you want your posts to be able to catch, make a decision. Is there someone open on the offside? Then we need to throw that ball out and keep it moving to create an open shot. Do you have the shot? That's where, if you've got posts, and as we just analyzed some of the Tempos posts, can those posts make those type of decisions on those kind of catches? Usually a catch that deep, if you just go back on the clip a little bit, okay, usually a catch that deep, you're just going to tell your post, like, go and finish. Unless you can't, like, turn to finish without a dribble. Like, she should just be turning to finish there and looking to get fouled. But these are things they're going to work on in practice. They're going to work on every day. They're going to break down the film and take a look at. But that's what we would refer to as flea action, kind of a fake ball screen with that second shooter. And then ball handler obviously looking to get downhill. And now you're playing off the spacing that you have.
And I know when you guys ran it, it was more to manipulate the help defender coming to the post. And I know you guys did a great job of finding your roll to the rim on this. I think when she's shown it, she actually brings multiple people behind the ball. So it's really important that that person who's the flea cutter, in this case, Sammy Wickham, who's an elite level shooter, if they have some gravity and pull defenders, again, you're just opening up space for the ball to play, but a very different way than just sort of back cutting.
Well, and if it's an interesting wrinkle on just kind of your spread ball screen or double ball screen offense as well. But at the same token, if you're just in any ball screen defense, and a basic concept of basketball is draw 2 to the ball. If you're drawing 2 to the ball with some interesting spacing and cutting, whether it be a loop cut like this flea action, or whether it be a corner cut, or like we referred to as a top, or you referred to as a 45 back cut or a burn cut, you're just putting the defenders in more decision-making situations, causing more confusion, and hopefully something's going to give. 2 might go to the ball, 2 might go to the cut, and then all of a sudden it opens up space to make easier decisions.
Mm-hmm. So a couple more clips showing the flea concept. Again, it's just opening up all sorts of space for the ball. And now people have to make a decision, like, who's the second person going to be coming? If it's the person who's low right now towards the bottom of the screen, it just makes an easy read to the corner. If the post defender comes to the ball, obviously you're potentially opening up a role. And most of the time here they do it with, I think, Fibic, the German player, really good shooter. Johannes is in the corner. So if you're helping out at all on the ball or helping out on the roll, there's just open jump shots everywhere. Here they have a pick and pop post though.
Now, Nate, if you go back on that clip a little bit, just to start it from the beginning, one thing we used to do as well, which is interesting, so stop it right there. As 13 is running the flea or circle cut action, the woman who is in the corner right now, or she's not really in the corner, but a little higher than the corner, sometimes if you cut her out as well, so you cut her out, it sends that shooter with no other defender on that side, which becomes very difficult to defend. Because if you're used to tagging the roller, so tagging the roller means the defender right now playing the woman in the corner, she might help on the roll to the basket by the 5 on this ball screen. If you get rid of her and cut her out, and now you send your shooter out in this flea or circle cut action, how do you rotate to that? Is the tag now going to come from her? It will leave her open. If you stay with her, now the roller might be open. So again, just manipulating the defense to cause them make decisions, or maybe it's something you run something like this and you keep in your back pocket for a little bit later in the game and you don't show it when you need a basket or it's under 2 minutes and it's in crunch time. So it might be something you hold on to as well.
And one of the things I will say with Sandy Brondello is she does a great job of using concepts in multiple different ways. So here you see the sort of the double drag into the flea. She'll do it out of a spread ball screen that we initially talked about. And then there's one more clip here from a ram screen. So a ram screen is simply, you can see the ball handler at the bottom of the screen, which is Enescu. We have Fibic, who's setting the ram screen for Jonquel Jones, who's coming to set it. But essentially it's the same concept, just done in different ways. Now, spacing on the weak side is a little bit different because you actually, I think, got Stewie up at the top of the screen. And if they don't guard that properly, it's just a quick kick to her and she's attacking downhill. So personnel based a little bit on the spacing, but the concept's the same, just done in a different way.
Yeah, Nate, if you just go back to the ram screen a little bit further back, a ram screen is a screen before the ball screen. So the 5 right here is going to come out in ball screen. But if we screen her defender to come out before we set the ball screen, now it's going to make that defender come out late, and it's going to be tougher. So if they were trapping that ball screen, if they were going to hedge that ball screen, which is a very aggressive 2 on the ball defense for a second to make her go back to half court or lose vision of the rim, this little ram screen, I refer to it also as a knock screen, meaning a screen before the ball screen. It just may get her to come late, force them to switch. Again, manipulating the defense to make decisions, or just maybe make your action a little bit cleaner and better before it begins.
Mm-hmm. But you can see the same concept, almost setting up like it's going to be a double drag afterwards, and just that flea cut underneath the ball screen to create the open shot. Double drag, Brad talked about before, this time with 2 posts. This time with a shooter as their 5, and Jonquel Jones, who's a really good shooter. And you see, as soon as the ball handler comes off, they're confused about who's helping and who's supporting the ball and ball screen situation here. Now, obviously, you got Stewie and Jonquel Jones involved in ball screen. Those are 2 of the best posts in the world. So there's all sorts of pressure on what they're going to do afterwards. But just another concept of that flea cut underneath. And I think this is the concept that they're going to use a fair bit because they have so many people that can create for themselves in ball screen situations. It's how do I open up that space so that they can turn the corner, create a little bit of confusion about who's trying to support. But I think this is the situation they're going to try to get into, and this is the spacing they're going to try to get into so they can utilize someone like Sykes and some of the other players that they have and be able to get to the rim. Or even just Mabry getting to that space and now being able to get to her pull-up or use her step back or little floaters too, if she can't get all the way to the rim.
Yeah, no, it's great action, and some of the fine details right there, which is really good. The ball handler just completely got downhill, meaning they're straight lining their penetration right to the rim. Basketball and offense is a lot about how do you put pressure on the rim. Are we doing it with penetration? Are we doing it with cutters? Are we doing it with passing? And right there, the ball went right down to the middle. And there was no wasted movements to the outside. She went right to the rim, and obviously, because of some confusion there defensively, she was able to get that layup.
Do you want to talk about step-up screens and how they might differ from spread screen or spread ball screens?
Yeah, so, with step-up ball screen pick and roll action, the screen is going to come from the inside or the interior. So this probably your big and maybe run to the rim happens a lot, in transition too, where big goes to the rim, and then the screen is going to happen from the inside to the perimeter. So sometimes defenses, will select different ways to play this because of that. But again, using your bigs to screen in most situations can create some short roll, long roll situations, but a very common ball screen type action that you're going to see in any professional basketball.
Yeah, essentially, instead of going to the middle like you've seen on some of the spread ball screen that we looked at, it's attacking the baseline side and can be a little bit more difficult to defend based on player personnel and how you're able to set up. So a lot of times they're trying to get guards downhill and set up rolls. You can see here attacking the baseline, guard is able to get downhill a little bit, roll gets to the rim. And now this is the catch that they actually do a pretty good job at some of their posts. It's sort of catching mid-range and attacking downhill on that catch, especially if they can catch with vision and play. I think all three of the posts that we highlighted earlier would do a really good job of this. Here again, this time, rather than being able to find the roll right away, this is a pass that showed up a couple times on some of their social media. So guard isn't able to turn the corner, not able to find the roll, quickly find the snapback or the pass behind or the guard who's filling into the space that was vacated, and then finding that quick post up afterwards. Another really difficult action to cover if you're able to turn the corner a little bit in some of that step up action.
And Nate, if you can just run it back again there as well a little bit. It's a very unique type of spacing action as well, because as you can see right here, when we get to the ball screen, right now, you're going to see you got these three players all spaced on the outside of the court. It's an open post concept, right? So just like the spread ball screen, it's still open post. If these players potentially, I got to think, you see how they're all reacting to the ball and shrinking the floor more, and they all basically have 2 feet almost in the paint. If they didn't have that, it's going to be tougher to play the roll, or potentially you might have one of these players cut to the basket as well. There might be some cutting options available. So again, there's definitely some reading there. Different teams will have different strategies on how they're going to play this. That's why, sometimes when I'm running offense or like to run things like this, I want to run it early, because obviously the other team's going to be prepared for it, have some kind of strategy, and I want to see how they're playing that initially. Because then, the chess game that basketball is, then we're going to have to adapt, maybe send a cutter, maybe something within that action we can target and see is going to be a little bit more effective in those situations.
Mm. And we'll take a look at a couple different step backs and a couple different things, but I do think that's probably the most basic one that we're going to see the most of, especially based on personnel. She's shown a couple different ways to use it just based on different players with New York and with Australia. You can see here, it's got the full corner, and this is something they did a fair bit with New York in some different ways to find their post, but same sort of concepts, just a little bit different spacing with that full corner or that player in the strong side corner. Here's the thing that they did an awful lot, and it starts to combine some of the concepts that we talked about. Full corner, both corners are filled. Step up is attacking the baseline. Forward almost gets into that short roll, but you can actually see the opposite 45 is getting into that burn cut or that back cut off the 45. Because what they want to do with some of the posts that they had is create that. With Jones, with Missman, with Stewart, if you can get a post in a closeout situation in mid-range, all three of those posts could shoot, could attack, could pass, or find the next player. But this is really what they tried to do with a lot of their step-ups with that burn cut, to be able to create that space for some of their best players in that area too. And I wouldn't be surprised if they use something similar like that.
Yeah, no, and if you just rewind that a little bit, again, I'm just thinking defensively here, like watch off this burn cut or 45 cut, watch the spacing that they have. So hold it. So right there, the ball handler, like these two, they could touch each other, right? So like defensively, you don't need two people to cover these people. You could have one cover, and as you see here, Phoenix may even have like someone who can roam and just zone up underneath the basket. Because, not in a perfect world, the kind of spacing that you want, but it still led to that player at the top of the key catching the ball wide open and creating a closeout situation, which is a little awkward here for Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting concept. I hadn't seen it used very much, and I saw them use it a lot in the playoffs last year. Now, here's another concept that I'm not sure that they'll use this, but it's sort of an interesting one that they used a fair bit with New York. You actually see one of their forwards handling the ball, in this case, Brianna Stewart. They would also do this for Jonquel Jones, but they'd actually have the guards setting the screens for the forward, or they invert the pick and roll where you have a big handle and a small screening. And it was just to create a little bit of an advantage downhill. And if they could turn the corner, they're going to get all the way there. Or sometimes they would literally spin, dribble, and get into almost of a post-up afterwards. But it's an interesting way to create a little bit of an advantage for a big, is actually to invert the pick and roll and actually have the forward handle and the guard setting it.
Super tough. And, that's obviously why Stewie's one of the better players in the world, because she's so skilled at her size. But if you can run, you almost have to play her big, because her threat of hurting you inside, and then you create an inverted pick and roll situation. Nate, if you just go back a tiny bit on the clip, you can see too, there's a point where it basically, they set that screen, that little rub, that little butt screen. If she threw back to the guard right here, so she penetrates, but if she threw back, there's another mismatch right there too. So she does get penetration to the basket, which you're going to take every time. But if she threw back to that other matchup, now you've got another matchup to attack a closeout. So again, very difficult to defend, and great exploitation of one of the better players who's got incredible size and an incredible skill package.
It'd be interesting to see if they would run it for Fagbenle or Sabally. I think they could do it, but obviously Stewart and Jones and McKibbon are three of the best post players in the world. So it was an interesting concept. So the last one, we're going to show a bunch of different examples of something that we would call wide. I'm not necessarily sure what you would call. I know you've run this both with national team stuff and with your Western team, but it's essentially a 5-out offense, starting with a 5 who sets an away screen and a bunch of different options. But I think this is something that they're going to be able to do if they decide to go a little bit smaller and obviously push their 4s a little bit more into the perimeter. And what you talked about before, just opening up the rim in a 5-out situation. We'll look a little bit what I would call a wide screen, where you can see there just a 5 setting the screen for the opposite player at the 45. And then all sorts of different options after that. But I just think it creates a lot of the same spacing concepts that we talked about in some of the other actions.
Yeah, so again, there's the screen away, all kinds of combinations of things that you can do off of this. I'm assuming that if the tempo does throw this in, it'll probably be a little bit personnel based. They can throw little wrinkles in to take advantage of individual skills on this stuff. But again, basketball, you don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Something extremely simple, just starts with an away screen, but then can lead to all kinds of interesting options and put a lot of pressure on defenses and matchups.
I think the other cool thing this could do is you put your 2 primary ball screen players at top, and now you got your 2 people that are creating in ball screen situations, and more your shooters and more your different players off in the corners. So I think personnel based, they could always have someone who could create in a ball screen situation up top. So just creates a lot of matchup problems for the defense, and then just playing through your concepts afterwards.
The one big thing, and is going to be a huge point of emphasis for all these teams that run this type of action is a lot of times, the defense might just stop it, but you got to keep the ball moving, and that's where your spacing's got to take place. So it's not just going to stop if we don't hit the roller, if the person who's lifting up out of the corner or is gets the next pass. You can't stop playing. We got to keep moving. We got to keep respacing. We got to keep attacking the paint and the basket with the dribble, because we got to try to keep the advantage somehow that we've created. So again, they're going to have all kinds of spacing concepts that they have, and that's where that part of the game is going to take over. Break it down, get the ball moving, create a closeout, create some kind of advantage, and now let's try to keep some advantage. So the possession might take a little bit longer, but we got to keep it moving.
And they can run all sorts of different stuff off here. I think some of it is going to be calls. I think some of it is just playing. And I think them as pros and some of the experience they have and some of the people, the creativity that they have, I think it's going to be fun just to watch them just set that away screen and then just play off of it. Now, this is one that they did show a little bit of concept, or a little bit in some of their video. So once the away screens happen, if there's no advantage, a second screen away, and a lot of times like a curl to the rim. Now, they didn't hit it that time, but I think that is a concept that we're going to see, and they've actually shown in some of their social media. So if there's not necessarily something initially, can the post set that second away screen and sort of get someone to the rim? I hope people get from some of this video is that spread ball screen, step up, and that sort of wide action or that screen away to start. I think those are 3 things that you're going to see as they start the preseason. Is there going to be other stuff they do? Without a doubt. But I think those are concepts that you're going to be able to see. And we'll just sort of let the last couple plays. But I do think this is the action that you're going to find sometimes is that screen away and that curl. And sometimes it's just to occupy defenses. They've created an advantage somewhere else. But they did show some of that as they got into some of their social media. Here you can see they start from a staggers, but very similar concept. Just a screen away and then they play off of it. But again, Sandy Brondello is very good about using one concept in multiple different ways and really matching it to her personnel. So I'm looking forward to seeing them as they get started with their preseason games.
Yeah, it'll be fun once we get that game in Wednesday, April 29th, I believe. Hopefully we'll start to see some of this. And, it may not have exactly the personnel that they want because obviously preseason action, they're going to throw different lineups. They're probably not playing the key players as much as you're going to see in regular season, but we'll definitely see some of those concepts and maybe some new stuff, which we can take a look at as well.
And I'll be interested to see with so many of the players either coming late from Europe or maybe still haven't gotten there. I think it's going to give us a great opportunity to see those maybe that we aren't predicting to make the team and see if they do some things that maybe surprise us. Because I do think that there's some players there that we didn't predict to make it that are still going to be in the mix. And I think if they show up and they show well, it's going to be a difficult conversation to have with some of these athletes because I do think they're going to cut some good pros. And I'm excited to see what their roster is. And again, I'm not necessarily sure it's done. I still think there's another piece out there that maybe we'll find towards the end of the preseason or even into the season. And then when we get the full picture of what this team looks like, I do think that they could surprise some people and definitely be in the mix for a playoff spot with just a little bit of tweaking.
It'll be interesting. We'll see how it works. Expect not many expectations on an expansion team, but they definitely have a little bit of talent. And over the course of the season, how many wins is that going to translate into? We'll find out.
Excited to see, and I'm excited to see what happens on our next podcast. Maybe we'll clean up a little bit of the rough edges, and we'll sort of figure out how to do this. But I've enjoyed it for the first time, and hopefully there's something useful for other people out there as well.